What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. I hope you guys had a wonderful week. I hope you guys enjoyed the time since the last time we got to speak. What a week. What a week it's been. It's been crazy around here because, well, our book is number one again. Well, it's in the bestsellers. I shouldn't say it's number one. It's in bestsellers as my dear friend, Tamara Leech, launched her book earlier this week called "Hold the Line." Let me pull that up. Let's discuss that right off the bat. There we go. Let's bring that up for you. Okay, so Tamara Leech launching her book "Hold the Line: My Story from the Heart of the Freedom Convoy." It's a number one bestseller in books. It's doing quite well in terms of sales, and there was some discrepancy for myself when I launched this book. When I launched my book, "Hold the Line: The Ballad of Tamara Leech," back at the end of January, because I had approached Tamara back in September of 2022 and talked to her about doing a book about her based on her story of the convoy and what happened afterwards. And I wanted to call it "Hold the Line." And I told her I wanted to call it that. And she's done this book in partnership with Rebel News and Ezra Levant, where she came to me back in January and told me that Ezra wanted to name the book "Hold the Line." And I know that was kind of like the catchy phrase of the convoy during the day, but what it's actually done now is it's brought some sales our way, because now everybody's searching "Hold the Line" and they're finding our book as well, sitting at the top. So we're sitting at a number one bestseller in our categories as well, and it's great. It's nice to see some attention's coming that way, because Amazon has been throttling the book. Amazon has been trying so terribly hard to stop book sales from moving forward. And a lot of people tend to ask me, is that really true? Does Amazon really do that? We'll get into that tonight. I actually want to talk about that tonight as we move forward. But it's great to see Tamara getting some love. It's great to see her getting some book sales. If you haven't picked up "Hold the Line: The Ballad of Tamara Leech," go get that. But if you haven't read, well, I'm assuming a lot of people haven't read Tamara's book yet. If you haven't ordered Tamara's book, go pick up a copy. I had the pleasure of reading it before it launched, and I've got to say it was a fantastic read. It's there's a lot of things in that book that you haven't heard of yet in testimonies, or that people have told us. There a lot of stuff that happened when Tamara was in prison, incarcerated, her bail hearings. It's all in that book. And it's stuff that she hasn't really mentioned in the public eye to date. So it's really interesting to sit and read. I would definitely recommend it for anybody who enjoys these kind of books of people's recalls, especially over something as unprecedented as the Freedom Convoy. Fantastic book. And I can't recommend it enough. We should get Spudman coming in. Welcome into the stream. We should get to play the arcade games while we wait. If there was a way I could set that up, I would. Suzanne Eckstein, welcome in. I just stopped in for support. I'm managing moderator and another live at the moment. Have a great stream. Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks for popping in. Yo, Joe, stepping in. Joe Lyman. Joe has a great server going on right now. If you guys are into PC gaming, plays 7 Days to Die. It's a zombie survival horror game. I basically call it Minecraft with zombies, but it's a lot of fun. If you're into that, let me know. Send me a message in the comments. I could send you a link as to where everybody plays in the Discord. And it's great because Clyde hangs out there sometimes, and a lot of people from Clyde's community. And Joe has set all that up on behalf of everyone. And it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to hang out there and play some games. Welcome into the stream, Joe. Now, Amazon is a tricky business. And a lot of people ask me, how does Amazon work? Because somebody was talking on Twitter today about, well, it was obviously a troll talking about, oh, someone took a picture of their foot and made it into a book and it made a KDP bestseller. First off, no, they didn't. And I can tell you why that didn't happen, because while Amazon has a vetting process, oh, here we go. Joe's posted this up right here. Server post Trudeau. Okay, there we go. So if you want to play 7 Days to Die, the server name is post Trudeau. and you can jump in there anytime. There's usually some guys hanging out there from Clyde's network. I'm in there from time to time, and as we get into State of the Channel, I may be in there a little less coming up, but it's a lot of fun. Go jump in, hang out in there. So Amazon, the way things work with Amazon is, hang on, I'm going to get logged in here. What? It doesn't want to work with me. Why doesn't Amazon want to work for me here? Sorry, folks. I'm having some issues with Amazon. There we go. Now we're in. I'm going to go into my reports on Amazon here. Now, I'm going to take a second before I share the screen because I don't want to be showing people, what's what on my sales charts and things like that. But what I want to do is go into, where's our orders? So the person, I got a little off track there. People who talk about let's zoom in a little. People who talk a little bit about this foot thing, saying, well, somebody took a picture of their foot and somebody made a book out of it. So Amazon has a vetting process when they put books through. Anytime I put a book through, you have to have the right format of your books. They have to check the content of the book to make sure it's within Amazon's guidelines. And they also have to make sure that it's an actual book. That it's formatted and put together properly before they put one together. So somebody on this troll comment put down a screenshot saying, this guy said, I became a bestseller because I took a picture of my foot and made a book out of it and sold like 3 copies and I became a bestseller. So let me explain how Amazon works. When you set up a book with Amazon, well, let's acknowledge the chat here real quick because Clyde jumped in. Congrats on making it a bestseller once again. Thank you so much, Clyde. Thank you. That's really awesome. Always happy to see the support, and Clyde's community has been great from day one with that book, with all of our books. So Amazon, Patty coming in. I wanted to say I got beer to deal with on YouTube. Happy St. George's Day. Okay, well, welcome in, Patty. How you doing? Mystical jumping in as well. Final episodes of Picard hit me in the feels. Okay, we're talking about Star Trek. That's okay. So with Amazon, let's stick to this on Amazon. So when you put a book through, you put in your kind of like your hashtags, your keywords to try and rank on Amazon's site. But you also put your book in categories. So we, for example, when we launch Unacceptable Fringe books, we tend to go in dark humor and political humor or politics. Sometimes we'll go in politics. Now, what happens with Amazon's ranking system at that point is if you go into a niche category, you can actually go to Amazon and request to be in a certain category. So if you put your book in, say, I don't know, political satire for clowns or something. Now that would be a subcategory that nobody buys books in. That doesn't even exist. Amazon, if you send them an email, will actually make that subcategory for you if you wanted to do that. Now, in order to be top of that category again, you'd only have to sell a couple of books and you're listed as a bestseller in that category. You're not listed as a bestseller in books, and we'll go over that too. But what happens there? What realistically happens is this person is alleging they took a picture of their foot, made a book out of it, and sold a couple copies. They were a bestseller, saying that Tamara has not earned the right to be a bestseller because it's a stupid claim. But when I talk about throttling, I wanted to get into this with Amazon because a lot of people always say, well, how much is Amazon throttling you? How much, like, is this really legit? Is it Is it something that happens? I'm going to show you my lifetime sales over the last year. So this is where this bar right here was the first month when we launched How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom. This blue bar right here. And I don't want to hover too much over there because I don't want to give out numbers. I know you can see numbers on the sides. But this was How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom. And as soon as July hit, they started to throttle the book. And what you'll notice on these other graphs is there's a line right next to it, and then a bunch of lower lines. And this is where I've said that when I went on Viva Fry's show, so from this top line right here from June, I went on Viva Fry's show, and I said my sales dropped 90% after I went on Viva Fry's show. And then I said it dropped 90% 6 days after that and stayed at that level. So what you see here is the 90% that it dropped on that second month, and then it kind of stayed low. Now, if you look at this bar over here where it's got the yellow in it, it's the same height as the bar that dropped 90%. So when I say throttling, what you're seeing here is that my books have never gone above this second bar in sales since the success of that first month of How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom. Now, I have pointed this out to Amazon numerous times and said we've launched 2 other books, which technically a third book, which was our limited run of How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom. And they both went bestseller. They were both #1 in books. This is not the behavior for #1 books. So it's very apparent and very clear that Amazon's throttling the book because it won't go above these 2 lines, this line and this line, in terms of all around sales. So it's not a matter of which books are selling, which ones aren't. It won't break that line. Every single day when I get my royalty ranks, they won't break a certain amount of money, no matter what I do. Now, I've called Amazon and I've said, hey, this doesn't make sense. This isn't how books should work. And they've told me, well, if you want to contest, if you want us to do an audit, you're going to have to go and get all the sales records for everybody who's bought your books to contest. So if we're telling you you've sold 1,000 copies of your book and you think you've sold more, you need to go and get all 1,000 order numbers of all of those books, bring them to us, and we'll start comparing them to our records and do an audit. To which point I say, come on, you're putting a Herculean task ahead of me. I'm supposed to go track down 1,000 book orders or 50,000 book orders or 25,000 book orders. That's impossible. Like, from complete strangers. Like, what am I supposed to do? Tweet out, hey, everybody, I want to do an audit with Amazon because I think they're screwing me. It's a silly business. And what's frustrating is that up until now, I'm searching for a publisher now. I'm searching for a way to maybe publish these books in retail. But part of the reason for that is because of the treatment of Amazon. And even though Amazon is the top seller of books in the world, the top distributor, I'd rather try to find a publisher who wants to buy into the rights to produce and distribute the books. Maybe an American publisher that can get them in Canadian retail. I don't know, because our biggest hurdle is that we make fun of the government. We make fun of Captain Blackface and his silly liberals, and nobody wants to carry that. So I kind of either have to put up with Amazon or find a solution. So ultimately right now, and people have said, well, can you produce it yourself? And I've said, no, the cost to produce is way too high. We just can't. We can't self-produce and self-ship and all that. We wouldn't make any money. I'd have to sell my books for a lot more than we currently sell them at in order to do that. But what I wanted to get down to here is Tamara's book, because people say she doesn't have the right to be a bestseller because it takes very little to become a bestseller. So let's show you what I was talking about. And we'll zoom in again. If you look down here, Tamara's book, when you scroll down to product details, so it says it's #1 in history of Canada books. Now, again, this is how you pick your categories and you can rank in those categories. So they've put her book in history of Canada, Canadian history, and memoirs. So these are called niche categories. And what those do is help you in your ranks. Traditionally, when people go on Amazon to find a book, they'll look at the top 25 books or something like that. And then if they don't see what they want, they move on, kind of thing. Because unless they're looking for a specific book, what I'm talking about is just natural sales. So what you see here is bestsellers rank number one in books. Now that's out of 3.5 million books roughly that Tamara's book is number one. So when people say, oh, it's easy to become number one, it's very easy to become number one in a subcategory. Becoming number one in books, I've had books come out prior to How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom that I'm happy just to have them in the top 100, let alone number one in books. When you're number one in books, you've made it. That there's authors out there that dream of making it to that rank. They're happy again being in the top 25 if they put a book out, because again, Amazon is the biggest distributor of books in the world. So when people say, well, Tamara, now look, we know that these are trolls. They're being salty. That they're just bitching because it's Tamara, but I'm showing you how it works so that you understand that when I say it takes a lot to be a number one book, that you understand how Amazon works in terms of their rankings. Let's get back into the chat really quick. Could you get a few dozen orders and then bring those orders to Amazon where they do not report them? You could do something like that, but the problem is that I'm making sales every day. So in order for me to do that, I would have to buy, say, 100 or 200 books. And I would have to prove that, again, those books weren't a part of what they recorded. How Amazon does it with their books is that when somebody buys a book, it doesn't register right away. It registers when the book ships. So, and when Amazon labels it as shipped. So for me to compare, like, some of the books could have shipped at one point and then they don't update it for another day or something. So if I come back to them and say, hey, I ordered 100 books and you only sold me 75 royalties yesterday or something, they could say, well, they didn't process until this day or something. So there's lots. I heard that I think it's RFK Jr. who's running in the US, who's actually suing Amazon for the same reasons. And part of the problem with Amazon is that if I was to go up against Amazon, and I've talked to lawyers, the problem is I'll go broke because litigation's expensive. Trying to fight a company like Amazon, a corporation, in court, that's like if I wanted to sue Disney tomorrow. It's not plausible. It's highly unlikely that I'll get anywhere. It'll just get delayed after delay after delay in court. You're going to pay all these fees in lawyers, in all sorts of litigation tie-ups. It's unfortunate. Chippy's in here in the stream. Welcome in, Chippy. I bought more than a couple. I know, and I met you in Winnipeg and signed your books. I'm very happy for the support. Very grateful. Thank you so much. Imagine an animated series on How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom. You know what? If I could ever make that happen, I'd love to. I actually reached out to, I think it's Freedom Tunes at one point, to see if they wanted to do something in conjunction. Unfortunately, their schedule is just way too busy and it takes them very long to get those videos out when they do them, because it's like a hobby that they do those. But it would have been cool. I'd love to see something like that. Maybe one day. Let's see. James Patterson just exposed this at NYT. Well, there you go. RFK is pretty awesome. I'll give him that. Welcome in, Beaver. Welcome into the stream. Things are good. I support good folks. I appreciate it, Chippy. I wonder if a wealthy fan would be willing to donate a couple hundred books to local schools. Hey, you know what? I actually seen posts of somebody who had found my book in a library and took a picture of their kid holding the book. And that was just amazing to see. Whatever library that is, thank God for them, because I don't know many libraries that would stock How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom. Mystical, that would be awesome. Yes. How's the mayor doing today? Well, I don't know how Jody Gondek's doing. If you're talking about me, I'm doing great. Thank you, Beaver. Welcome into the stream. Yeah, so Amazon's a weird beast. It's a strange. Now, don't get me wrong, I've done okay on Amazon, but when you look at the process of putting something like this together, formatting, paying an illustrator, promoting. I'm always on YouTube. I'm always on different places doing interviews, trying to promote with all the work that goes into these things. It's just a shame when a company like Amazon jumps in politically and says, yeah, throttle that because we don't want it selling. My question is it selling and they're keeping the profits, or are they, and they're not maybe reporting the books, or are they just canceling orders? Are they trying to hide it from search engine results? I mean, anytime I search it, I can find it. I've heard people tell me different things, but I hope that's not the case. The point is this wasn't supposed to be a pity party. It was I hope this doesn't happen to Tamara, and I hope it doesn't happen with Tamara's book, because while rumors have circulated of people saying, well, I heard she bought a house in Quebec, I heard that, she did all these things with money. I always go, God, like, you got to love the rumor mill, because like, I know Tamara personally. I talk to her almost daily, and I can assure you she's had a very tough time over the last year, to 3/4 of a year, with dealing with trying to get something as simple as a bank account, let alone trying to get any forms of payment or money. She doesn't have a dime. Ezra Levant offered her this book deal. I know that she was given an advance, and it wasn't, things about book advances are, it's not like you get, $50,000 or something. You get a very small, like, we're talking like maybe $5,000. Like, you get an advance, which has helped her out, but she rents. She doesn't even own her home. She's not that means you're poor, but, and I'm not calling Tamara poor either, but what I'm saying is that she's just getting by. She was just getting by. Hopefully the sales of this book will help her out and get her back into a stable state in terms of her life. Again, I don't want to make too much of her life, public, but anybody who dispels this, oh, she's loaded, she took the money and ran, she did it. No, her name isn't, well, I'm not going to say his name. I don't want to talk about him. But look, she's not the one from the convoy that took the money and ran, is all I'm going to say. She's very genuine. She's one of the nicest people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and talking to. And I wish her all the best. I hope her book does well. And I'll take this opportunity to thank Ezra Levant for the free advertising, because it's done a job for us this week. So Patty coming. I figure CIA will whack him before or after the election, before the Democratic debates. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I hope not. In regards to interviews, do you seek them out, or do they mostly come to you? Anytime I've done an interview, they've come to me, for the most part. So I've talked about the story numerous times about Clyde, and how when I was working on How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom, I messaged him. God, that was about a year ago. About a year ago now, maybe back, March, early April. I emailed Clyde because he had an email address attached to his YouTube channel. And I just said, look, I got this book. I'm working on it. All I had was the concept drawing of the cover, and said, I'd really love if I could bring this onto your channel. If you'd review it, I'll send you a copy. And I'd like to get it out. So when we first started the books, I approached a lot of different channels, because I knew media didn't want to touch this. And Amazon had already told me I wasn't allowed to advertise something that had COVID in it, or satire against the government, that they wouldn't promote it. So I tried to go a different route. I tried to get smart with it and say, there's a lot of like-minded people that watch Clyde's videos. There's a lot of like-minded people that watch, Jasper, Mr. Sunshine Baby, or people who watch Viva Frey, or, Live from the Shed at the time. So I reached out to a lot of those guys, and the only person I heard back from was Clyde. And Dave at the Shed I heard from just after the book launch, so I don't want to scrutinize Dave too much. But I didn't hear back from anybody except for Clyde. And it was by luck, because Clyde had told me many times he doesn't check that email very often. And he stumbled on it. He saw the cover and said, yeah, when you finish it, send it my way. I'd be happy to take a look at it. And I'm very grateful he supported it. When I offered to send him a copy, I said, I got the books finally, let me send it out. And his review video was already up. And he bought the book because he wanted to support what we were doing. And his community, took it and ran. They rallied, and what a ride! I've never seen anything like that in my life. I've talked about this before. I never thought at any point in time when we launched that book that we'd be seeing revenues daily that would grant me the rights to go out and buy a brand new car in full. Like we were selling books, and I thought when this book launched, hey, we'll sell some copies. We'll maybe make, $5,000 or something, and I'll give my illustrator what she's due, and we'll move on to another product. But my God, people rallied, and people love the book, and people when they find our other books, when they hear about our other books, they love them, and they tell me they love them. That's not me trying to be facetious or a narcissist. People have genuinely told me they enjoy the books, and I think that's one of the most frustrating things when I run into people and they say, "Oh, it's been out for 4 or 5 months. We didn't know that you had a second book or a third book," and it makes it difficult because you've got a good product, and those who have actually found it are telling you how much they enjoy it, but trying to advertise is impossible. That's why anytime I post it on Twitter, I'm like, share it, please retweet, tell people about it. Verbal advertising is the only form of advertising we have, and it makes it difficult. You look at guys like Steven Crowder, who are cut out of a lot of things. They had to do things like Mug Club just to keep their revenue coming in because YouTube wanted to throttle them, shut them down. They've had their back and forths. So it's kind of like in that situation. Now Crowder has an easier time because he has an established audience. And at that time, I was just getting into the game. But since Clyde and since his community, I've had, again, Rebel comes to me. Viva had me on his channel. Live from the Shed had me on their channel. Rebel had me out. I've met with Jordan Peterson. I've had Jordan Peterson tweet out my books. I've when I go to even wrestling events like last month with Diana Hart, who I never thought I'd have the pleasure of meeting, let alone be invited to hang around with her. Now Diana Hart is the widow of the British Bulldog, Davy Boy Smith, who she's now, since his passing, she's moved on. She's now with former CFL legend Tom Forzani. And I never thought I'd be invited to a wrestling event that when I go in there and I meet Bret Hart for the first time of my life, and my 8-year-old inner self is having an aneurysm because this is the guy I watched put the sharpshooter on everybody in the ring growing up watching wrestling. I used to flock to the TV on Saturdays to watch wrestling because it was on too late and my parents would record it for me on VHS. So I'd always watch it on Saturdays right after cartoons. And to meet this guy and have him say, "You're the guy that did How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom." And it's like, wow, my childhood hero knows who I am. and it's just been a ride. It's been a hell of a ride. It's been very surreal and very humbling that people enjoy what we do so much. And I will always be grateful for everything. Even if it ended tomorrow, what a ride. It's not going to end tomorrow. We'll see how things move going forward, but that's going to bring me to our discussion about the state of the channel, because this week is going to be particularly different when it comes to YouTube. And speaking of whether things are going to end or not, currently I'm in the process of trying to finish Riley and Vera's Guide to Grooming, which is our next book coming out. So I'm going to have to take a step back from YouTube. I'm going to try to get some videos recorded this week. Tomorrow's video, or if you're watching this Monday, we'll have the replay of this stream for Monday. But as Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday goes, I'm going to try to get videos when I can. I really got to focus on writing the rest of this book and getting it ready to come out so that we can begin the art side of it, drawing it. I'd like to get it out by summer. And as much as I love doing these YouTube videos, as much as, I want to keep things consistent, it's going to be a bit of a risk to step away for a few days. But part of my issue as a full-time father is that my wife goes to her job. I'm in charge of a 2-year-old all day. And this 2-year-old in particular is one of those 2-year-olds that if you turn your back for more than 5 seconds, he's lighting a house fire. So I don't have the luxury of working on the book during the day. And when my wife gets home from work, by the time the kids get to bed and I sit down to start doing YouTube videos, that's about the only time I have to work on any projects. And I have to make a cut somewhere and say, where do I need to focus my attention? So for this week, it's going to be a little wobbly when it comes to content. I'm still going to have some, so I don't want people thinking, I'm not going to have new content. It's just that it may be a little lacking in terms of consistency. Just so I can get this project done, because I really want to get this book out. This book is going to be our opportunity to move into the American market as well as Canada, or the global market, so to speak. Because with Canadian satire books, we're very limited on our audience. And I've got some really good ideas. And I've told you before when we've talked about this book that I'm kind of going to be teetering on Amazon's terms of service guidelines. Like we're going to push the envelope a little bit with this book. So for those who read my other books to their kids, I wouldn't advise this new book being read to your children. This one is definitely for adults. And just because of the context, it's not like we're going to have cuss words or, graphic pictures or something. We're just going to, we're getting into the whole sexualization of children. We're getting into the whole grooming aspect of things. And there's a lot of people in the limelight that I want to go after in this book and put out there in the public eye, so to speak, which is going to be a bit of an undertaking. And it has been, because I've been working on this book for a while now, and I'm having the hardest time trying to figure out, how do I stay within the lines of decency, and how do I rhyme things, because people like the rhyming in the books. I want to stick to that formula. So I'm really going to take this week to try and finish that. So I hope everybody understands. And I hope everybody's okay with that, because if I want to bring out another project, this is what I'm going to have to do. And unfortunately, books pay the bills a little bit more than YouTube when it comes to the end of things. And even if YouTube paid a little more, I'd still want to stick to my work and try to keep people entertained. That's the whole reason I got into this. And that's just what I'm going to have to do. So keep your eyes out this week. Again, new content will drop when I can. And hopefully we can get this new book out. And hopefully it does well, because if the book continues to be throttled, if I can't find another publisher, I've told my illustrator a couple times now that it could spell the end for Unacceptable Fringe. We can't afford to keep making books if we're not able to sell them, so to speak. So this one, if we're going to go down, I want to go down fighting. I don't think we're going to go down. I don't want to make it sound bad. This isn't a plea either, or everybody go and buy it or else. It's not an ultimatum. It's just with the low sales of our other books because of Amazon, it just makes it hard. It makes it hard for us to justify the time, the energy. For me to write a book, it doesn't take very much. But for my illustrator, for a single illustrator who's juggling a college career, it's tough. It's tough to put deadlines on her and request 100% of her effort when she's also learning what she's doing for her future. And if there's no money coming in, if we're not seeing sales, it's hard to convince her to give her time to that. So again, I don't want to make it sound like a grift or like it's money or else. I'm just saying that anybody would realize in any business, if you're not making money, you can't stay in business. And that's where we're headed. So we'll see where things go. And I'm going to make it clear that when I say these things, I'm still very confident in what we can do, and what we're going to do. So I don't want anybody thinking this is the end of Unacceptable Fringe. or and Mystical has a great point here. Maybe the Daily Wired would be interested in it. I would love for them to be interested. It's getting a hold of them that's the problem. To try and get a hold of those guys, you don't just send a basic email. You usually got to talk to somebody higher up there, and believe me, I'm working on it. So that's where I've said, like, when it comes to the books, I've been looking at a publisher. I've been looking at maybe a US publisher to distribute to Canada or ship to Canada, because a US publisher doesn't have any skin in the game when it comes to Canadian politics. So we are looking at different avenues. And I guess that's what's taking up a lot of my time, is that it's not that I think we're going to run out of business or that we're not going to, survive as a company. It's when we wrote How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom, it was, how do we take this idea and find a way to get it to the masses? And we went outside the box by approaching Clyde, by approaching other channels, and it was a success. So all we're doing now is looking at it from a strategical standpoint and saying, how do we maximize output for the work that we're doing? And unfortunately, those things take time. And I'm going to be working on it. If Unacceptable Fringe was to cease making books, it would take at least a year from now for us to come to that decision. So we're not going anywhere, and it's not going to affect my mayoral run. And yeah, fun times ahead. So let's keep our eyes peeled for this book. It's going to be great. I'm telling you right now, we've got a lot of people in this book, like Bill Cosby and Jeffrey Epstein, and some political people from the US that I don't want to get into too much, but it's going to be a good book that I think it's going to make some waves. My good friend Theo Fleury has offered to help me get in touch with Tucker Carlson and some of his folks. So hopefully that goes through. And, again, if we can make good impressions with Tucker and his folks, sky's the limit. And I don't think we'll have any problems going forward. Let me get caught up in the chat here. Mystical, the whole mainstream publishing entertainment industry is a hive of scum and villainy. I wholeheartedly agree. Many indie authors have declared an iron age. Yes. Elix, I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. I'll be voting for you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Welcome into the stream. I believe this is the first time we've seen you in the stream, so welcome in. Derek's in the stream. Welcome in. Terrible Twos. Take care of you and your family. I'll help keep the numbers. I appreciate that, Derek. Thank you so much. And speaking of numbers, we're less than 200 away from hitting 5,000 subs. So we're climbing. It's good to see. Thank you to everybody who's new, everybody who's coming in and enjoying the content as we move forward. Master Snatch coming in. Stay strong. Thank you so much, bud. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming in. Tim Pool may be a viable option. Again, it's getting in touch with these people. That's the issue. But again, if we can make connections with some US counterparts, and I know, like, I've spoken to Theo, and again, there's a lot of things that go on in the background that I don't really put on stream, or I don't tell a lot of people, but there are things in the works that I think are going to be very beneficial to the books, to the brand, to everything moving forward. And yeah, just fun times ahead. Speaking of fun times, somebody who was having fun times, and let's get into some of that, because if we're not going to be cranking out the videos this week, I do want to touch on a few things here. A man in BC. Now, my good buddy Clyde talked about this. You should go check out his video. We've talked about the issues with, as Clyde calls it, a nonce. We can't say the P word on YouTube without getting throttled as well. The censors don't like it too much. Maybe we call him a pediatric. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the P word. We just stick with the P word. An offender. But as a trans man, a trans-identified male, being accused of spying on girls in the change room at a Nanaimo, BC pool. We've talked about how this is a precedent for the reason I'm running for mayor. The reason that I want to run for mayor in this town is Jody Gondek's ridiculous bill that allows anybody to go into any of these city-run facilities and say, well, I'm a woman and I'm just going to go into the women's change room and you can't say or do anything about it. And if the people in that change room are uncomfortable with it, they are offered a different change space if available. I think that's ridiculous. That's welcome to Banana Republic of Canada. Now in Nanaimo, BC, this is a convicted offender, which is part of the thing that I've always talked about, that I've said is part of the problem, is that there's no security checks, there's no vetting, there's no process to verify who is going into these rooms, who is saying, well, I see myself this way. I see myself as a billionaire, but here I am talking to you guys about if things don't improve, we may not be able to move forward as a business. Nobody fills my bank accounts because of how I see myself. It's the same thing here. This person could see themselves as Mikhail Gorbachev, and that doesn't mean he is. And that's the problem here, is that biologically, no matter how you see yourself or identify, you should have to go into the space that is designated to your biological gender. And if you don't want to do that, then these facilities should offer an alternative. But their answer to this problem should not be, well, we'll just let them in there then. That shouldn't be it, because the problem is women and children are vulnerable. We're putting them at risk. As we can see in this article, as a trans male identified accusing of spying on girls in the women's changing room in Nanaimo, British Columbia, has been identified by local residents as the convicted nonce, or nonce as Clyde calls it. In February, Jana Wright was threatened with arrest after confronting a male wearing a wig whom she alleges was peeking under her daughter's stall at a Nanaimo aquatic center. So the mother of the daughter was arrested, or threatened with arrest. Sorry, not arrested. She was threatened with arrest for having a problem with this, on the grounds of human rights. Well, where's the rights for her daughter to be secure? Wright reported the incident to management, but was told it was indeed the trans-identified male's right to be in the female changing room. Wright told Redux that the staff warned her she could be arrested for removing the male from the women's change room. She then reported the incident to police. Now, with the help of local residents, Redux has revealed the individual as a convicted P-word who goes by the name of Kylie Otter, sometimes spelled Riley or Riley. Oh, he spells it with a Y because that's the in thing. That's the in thing, guys. You got to put a Y on it. So it's like ghetto. It's the ghetto slang. What do they call that? Ebonics? In 2019, at the age of 28, Otter was sentenced to 14 months in jail and 24 months probation for sexual interference against a young person. Otter confessed to touching an 8-year-old girl for deviant purposes on 9 separate occasions. This abuse occurred between December 2015 and 2016. So in 9 months, he assaulted an 8-year-old girl 8 times. 9 times, once a month. He was in a position of trust. The girl informed her parents of the abuse, who then reported it to RCMP. Otter pleaded guilty to all charges in 2017. The convicted biological male began identifying as a woman in 2018. And this is part of the problem. This is part of the problem that I've talked about with this slippery slope as we go into this, is that people say, well, this is about rights. It has nothing to do with rights. This has nothing to do with rights. This is all about sexualization, and it's all about people's kinks and perversions. And the reason I say that is because, again, while discussing my mayoral race, I said, if they're very set on, if a trans male says I identify as a female, if they're set on not going into the male change room, let's make a trans change room, trans only. And you can only go into that change room if you're 18 and over. And if you offered that, they would lose their minds, and it wouldn't be good enough. And the reason for that is because it has nothing to do with them feeling secure in their new skin, so to speak. It's about them having access to your kids. It's about them having access to your wives, your sisters, your mothers, your daughters. It's all for the purpose of making you feel as uncomfortable as possible. They love it when we talk about this. They love it when we push back on this because it's almost getting them off. And now, peeking under doors, a convicted nuns peeking under doors of a little girl who assaulted an 8-year-old girl multiple times. I don't know how more clear you can make this in an argument that we've opened a Pandora's box when it comes to this stuff. If this gentleman, and I will call him that forever because I don't care about his feelings, this gentleman can just waltz into a women's change room and do whatever he pleases and have parents threatened with arrest for having a problem with it, what's to stop them from assaulting your children? How do we know who's going in there and who's around your kids? It's sickening. It's sickening. It makes me sick talking about it. I had a friend recently come to town, and he'd been here before from Manitoba, and we have a wave pool near our home, big indoor water park facility, wave pool, and we've had, I don't know, we've gone there multiple times, and this friend of mine had been there before when he came to visit before he had kids. And when he was coming out here during spring break, he says, "Hey, can we take the kids to this wave pool?" And I said, "Well, you can." And he said, "Well, why won't you?" And I said, "Because it's not a matter of support that I'm boycotting or I don't want to support the facility." And I'll kind of reiterate as why I'm saying that after. But I said, this is about safety. It's about the safety of my children. My wife doesn't feel comfortable going to those facilities with our kids because we don't know what's going to be shoved in our face. And I can assure you that if a man went into a women's change room and looked at my kids changing, he'd be leaving without his teeth. Even if I'm running for mayor, I don't care if I got a criminal record for it. It would do nothing more than help my campaign. The guy would be leaving without his teeth, maybe a broken arm, broken legs, so he can't walk into another one. I have no respect for anybody who wants to behave like that. But we didn't go. And the reason I say that it had nothing to do with support, and recently, I was talking to my good buddy Clyde about this. So recently, I ran into a bit of a problem because before this CRA strike that went through with his government employees, my wife and I were booking a vacation for our kids this year. And my mother-in-law was going to come on the trip, and we booked Disneyland. And people said, "Why are you going there? You're supporting groomers." And I says, "Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem with that. I know what Disney's doing. I know what they're doing, and I know what's going on there. My kids don't see that. My kids don't watch the woke movies. They don't enjoy them. They enjoy the originals. And what I mean by that is like let's say, for example, the Beauty and the Beast live action movie. I haven't watched it. But I'll put on the animated one for my kids. They prefer the animated one. They just prefer animation because it's more centered to kids than a dramatic movie. But my kids don't see the woke stuff. They don't see the nonsense. And my kids have been locked in their house for the last 3 years and told we're not allowed to travel. We're not allowed to go anywhere. My son, who's turning 7 this week, is getting his first birthday party because when he started school, everybody's on lockdown. 7 years old, and he's getting his first party. So when it came time to plan a trip for our family, as much as I have a gripe with that company, I know that the magic is there for my kids. My kids watched their grandmother die of cancer during lockdowns, and we weren't allowed to grieve. We weren't allowed to go to the funeral. Well, we were allowed to the funeral, but we weren't allowed to be around our family. We weren't allowed to see people. When we buried my mother, it was just us at the graveside. People weren't allowed there because you're outdoors, and heaven forbid, people cough or people are next to each other. So from all the nonsense my kids have been through in the last couple of years, this wasn't a trip about me. It was, what can I give my kids to make up for everything that was taken from them? And we asked the kids if we could go anywhere or do anything, what would you want to do? And their first thing was Disney. So I felt as a father that despite my gripes, and believe me, I don't want to give a dime to these folks. And I had that discussion with my mother-in-law, who ended up paying for the passes for Disney, just because she said, if I'm spending my money, that's my decision. And then you're not paying for Disney. But despite my gripes, I can put those aside for 4 days to give my kids the best 4 days of their life, because they deserve it. If they were in their teens and they knew the agendas that were going on at Disney and everything else, then yeah, I probably wouldn't want to go there. And they'd see it too. But when they're 7 and 9 years old, and when they've thought about this their whole childhood, I can't disappoint them and say no. I don't want to do that. Now, luckily, we are going to go to Universal. We're going to go to Super Nintendo World. But now that's all at stake, because if we can't get our passports by September, we can't go. So we'll see. But it's crazy. Chris, I'm going to bring in here. Disney's a horrible company. Mickey Mouse should be put in public domain and their lawyers held up after other. Yeah, I agree. Snatch coming in. Should you be supporting Disney Inc? Well, again, like I said, I didn't support Disney on this trip. My mother-in-law bought the tickets because I told her I don't want to support it. I don't like supporting their woke ideologies. Now, I'm going to enter the gates of their park, but again, I don't want to argue semantics, and I don't want anything. I'm trying to get people to understand that my children have had the worst 3 years of their lives. Probably the worst they'll ever have, simply because they weren't allowed to have friends over. They weren't allowed to go out. They weren't allowed to play sports. They weren't allowed to have sleepovers. All the things kids normally did from the ages of 5 to 9. Their first this, first that's, they missed out on. And before things took off from a business standpoint for myself, we never dreamed of having the money to do a big vacation like this. So when we have the opportunity, yeah, I have to look at myself and say, can I put my shit aside for 4 days, despite my opinions, my feelings, for something my kids don't see? My kids don't notice it. Like, if we watched, God, something as bad as Frozen or Frozen 2, and I've been told Frozen 2 has a lot of the stupid male, dumb, bumbling idiot males and, strong women who don't need men. My kids don't notice that. They notice that, like if my daughter was like, my daughter doesn't like Frozen, but what I'm saying is, if my daughter watched it, she'd just be seeing a movie of people interacting with each other and mindless entertainment. She doesn't see the woke stuff. Now, we're very selective in our house about what the kids watch. And I don't like them watching this woke shit. We've gone over that a million times over in this house. But any stuff that's slipped through, my kids don't see it. My daughter recently started asking me about religions and race and things like that, because it's starting to come up at the age of 9, but she never noticed it before. She just noticed kids when she goes out. She doesn't look at skin color. She doesn't look at ideologies. She doesn't look at politics. She just sees the world for what it is. And that's kind of what I've been saying when it comes to this whole trans thing. Excuse me, is that you got to just let kids be kids. And that's what I'm doing for 4 days is I'm allowing my kids to be kids. And Clyde has a good point. This is why Disney is still doing fine despite their behavior. I understand that. And I get that. And I'm not trying to make concessions for Disney. What I'm simply stating is that when my mother-in-law came to me and said, look, if you don't want to pay for that, I'll pay for it. And then you don't have to worry about it. I said, well, but we're still going in there. She says, they're not going to see any of that. They just want to go on rides. They just want to be kids and run around and giggle and laugh and have fun. And that's the end of it where I can accept it and say, okay, again, I'm not endorsing Disney. I'm not going in there and saying they're the greatest place on earth still. I think Universal, honestly, is offering better things than Disney. And I'm more excited to go to Universal personally than Disney. But for my kids' benefit, yes, I'm going to go. It's, I'd like to go while they're young and while they don't see this shit. Anyway, speaking of Disney and speaking of Universal, a little bit of a segue. I didn't really segue very well, but Disney coming in or being embarrassed again for another week with Super Mario. I wanted to talk about this because first off, the Super Mario movie, if you want to talk about something that isn't woke, something that's wholesome, dumb, mind-numbing family entertainment, this is it. We went to see this movie the Thursday it released. My kids loved it. Usually when we go to a movie, even when it's a kid's movie, my kids are usually wiggling around on the chairs. They can't hold their attention. They're talking. They're disruptive. But most kids are when they go to movies. When we went to this movie, my 2-year-old sat still in my wife's lap, mesmerized at what he was watching on the screen. Now, part of that is because, you see behind me, my kids know who Mario is. Even my 2-year-old, he knows Mario very well. And we sat in this theater, and this movie is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's definitely in my top 5. And that's not just being a video game fan. It's because of everything they did in this movie. Back to the Future is my top movie of all time. The reason for that is it's fantastic writing. It's got an amazing musical score. The actors are phenomenal. The story is just great. And it holds up as an instant classic. Anytime you mention anything from Back to the Future, people start spitting lines. It's an instant classic and will always, no pun intended, remain my number 1 movie of all time. Super Mario, the reason I put it in those top 5 is because the story isn't magnificent. It's not a fantastic, oh my God, movie. But if you've grown up, if you've ever touched a Mario game, if you've ever played Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, Nintendo of any kind with Mario, Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, 3, Super Mario World, any of them, you're going to love this movie because they did the one thing movie studios aren't doing, and that's fan service. They said, we're not going to make some artsy, woke, out of line movie that, we see a vision for something and we move forward with it. They wanted to make a movie for the fans. They knew they have a big fan base. Nintendo did it right by partnering with Universal. They didn't give the movie to Universal for them to just do what they wanted with it. They partnered with them. And good on them. Because what we're seeing here is they're going towards $900 million worldwide. They haven't even launched in Japan yet. Japan, I don't know why it's delayed in Japan. I don't know why they waited for Japan, but it's coming out in Japan. This movie's going to hit $1 billion, possibly close to $2 billion, I'm thinking, by the time it's out of theaters. If you listen to the music in this thing, they've said, people who search for Easter eggs have said There's 128 tracks they've counted so far from different Mario games in this movie. The whole musical score is comprised of Mario games. It's not, there's a few licensed tracks in that movie, but it's mostly symphonic melodies from Mario games. It's gold. My inner child was sitting there happy because I said, this is the movie I've been waiting 35 years of my life for. But I'm more happy that I get to experience that with my children, whom they've wanted something like this ever since seeing the Sonic movies. And and Mystical hits it too, where he says the Sonic movies were pretty good too. They were good. And I'm starting to think this is going to be, superheroes are kind of on their way out, I think, in the movies. And I think this is going to be the next thing. When somebody nailed it in the chat here that said we need Angry Canadian. We need a Zelda movie. It's coming. It's it's coming at this point. There will be a Zelda movie. There's so many franchises they could make movies out of at this point. If they were to follow the same formula, they can easily do a Zelda movie. As long as Link isn't saying, excuse me, like he did in that 80s cartoon, but they could do a Zelda movie, Metroid, Bayonetta. We could see, I know Bayonetta is tied to Capcom, but it's in conjunction with Nintendo. We could see a Bayonetta movie. Pikmin, you could easily do a Pikmin movie. Kid Icarus, you could make a movie out of that. Castlevania, I know, again, that's Konami, but they have a partnership with Nintendo. You could see, even though Castlevania had a very profitable Netflix series, I think you could do something along those lines. Maybe not in the style of Super Mario, but if Nintendo wanted to make movies for adults and children, they could definitely do a Castlevania. If you want to go strict Nintendo franchises, you could see an F-Zero movie. I think you could. Star Fox. Could you imagine if Star Fox came out and did better than Star Wars in terms of Platinum and Sega? Yes, but they do have, okay, so maybe Sega makes the movie, but they do have a partnership with Nintendo. Clyde coming in. There's always a delay in Japan. Not sure why, but it's always been that way. Fair enough. But when it hits Japan, that movie's going to explode. It's going to be crazy. Mystical, God, you hit me right in the strings there. I want a good Mega Man movie. I do too. So my kids watched the really, I don't want to call it bad, but the average early 90s Mega Man cartoon, anime style, that came out in the US. I think there's only 2 seasons of it. I've downloaded the whole series for my kids, but they still watch it today. We still play the Mega Man games in this house. Mega Man is one of my favorite retro video games of all time, and I would kill for a Mega Man movie. But in terms of Nintendo, God, there's just so much they could do. I mean, Donkey Kong can have a movie. They could do a Donkey Kong Country movie at this point, which I think will be inevitable. Kirby, they could do a kids Kirby movie. Like, do we really? Any other Splatoon? You could. It's so child oriented. You could do literally any franchise they've made, any first party franchise. They could make a Captain Toad movie at this point. Now they're talking about the NCU as a. I don't want to see cross universe stuff. Keep them all separate. I'll be happy. I'll be happy. But Nintendo, when Nintendo's done with this movie, 900 million worldwide so far. It'll hit $1 billion by next weekend, if not tomorrow, because these are yesterday's numbers. So who knows where we're going to be sitting, but look, the movie's doing gangbusters, and it's offset so many records. And what it's showing Disney, what it's showing all these companies, much like the protest against Bud Light is showing people with woke, go broke, is that nobody's going to see this shit. Nobody's going to see your garbage, half strung together movies. What's Disney got coming out? Something about elementals or something. It'll be interesting to see how their new movie does against this. Even Guardians of the Galaxy. And so there's Clyde giving the old Macho Man. They say it's yesterday's news. It's that's a good one for good old Randy Savage. Finally gets to drop that in here because I drop that in his chat all the time. It's going to be interesting. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I don't think is going to do as good as the Super Mario movie has done. Because if you look at the track record, when it came to Ant-Man, Quantumania, Mario outdid all of Quantumania in 3 days of its opening weekend. Any of their properties, Multiverse of Madness flopped. All of their movies so far have just taken a bath in the last year. What was I can't remember the one that Disney put out that was so like it was animated and it was so woke that it went nowhere. And they took, I think it was $100 million loss on the movie. Joe coming in. It's giving a strong example of how one can still push the narrative. Just don't disrespect the franchise. But that's the thing with Nintendo. It basically writes itself. Like it's one of those things where you go in and say, guys, all we have to do is stick to the fan base, stick to the narrative that we've always done. Basically take a video game and make it into a movie, and we've got a hit on our hands. There's no special work needed aside from just be based, be true to your fans, and you're going to make money. There it is right there. Mystical got it. Strange Worlds. Strange Worlds took $100 million bath on this woke stuff. And what this shows Disney is the same thing it shows to these companies and video games that say single player games aren't worth it anymore. We just do multiplayer because nobody's playing single player. And then you got games like God of War that come out and shut the world down and say, still think nobody plays single player campaigns of video games? That's what Mario's doing here with movies, is it's saying your woke stuff isn't working. And as long as Disney wants to stay committed to that woke ideology and write garbage movies, they're going to start getting in trouble because they have investors they have to go to at some point. And those investors are going to, they're going to come back and kick them in the ass. I think Disney's in big trouble. Buzz Lightyear lost 100 million, not billion, but yes. Oh, you corrected it down there too. Angry Canadian, stick with source material. You can't go wrong. The Witcher. Now, The Witcher is in trouble because Henry Cavill's not coming back. They wanted to focus on the strong independent woman. And I mean, what can we say other than get your popcorn and get ready to laugh? I think we're going to see a shift when it comes to this stuff. I think if you look at the last month, in terms of pushback, when it came to Bud Light, when it comes to this Mario movie embarrassing Disney, Nike, all these things going on, it's showing that we're starting to win a few of these battles, that the term go woke, go broke is stronger than ever. And a lot of these billion-dollar companies are going to have to start deciding, do we bend the knee anymore in the stake of, appealing to the 0.01% of people, or do we get back to being based and move our product forward? It's Rob coming in. People are sick of it. No one wants politics shoved down their throat when trying to enjoy a movie. And that's the problem, is that people aren't going to a movie to see politics. They're going there to just be entertained for a couple of hours. Look at movies like John Wick, right? There's no bullshit in those movies. It's just mindless action. It's a little stretched, but it's mindless, good old fashioned action. It's one of the reasons I always like the Expendables movie. Sonic wasn't, pushing those narratives, and I liked it. I thought they did a good job considering all the flack that it was getting when they first released what they thought Sonic should look like before the fans came back. And then they said, well, listen to the fans, and look how much that worked out for them, listening to the fan base. It's, and Snatch coming in with a little jab. They're doing fine with people going to the park and paying the monster. The problem is that people aren't going to the parks anymore. They're still doing well in the parks, but their average revenue in the parks, there was a report released the other day saying that they're dropping. Part of that is a U.S. recession. But part of it is that Disney has been trying to price people out of going to the parks to reduce wait times and lines. So one thing my mother-in-law noticed when she picked up these passes for if and when we take our kids is that they offer this thing called Genie Plus, which I was like, oh, it's like a fast pass. No, it's not. They nickel and dime everything when you get to the park now. So it's like you want to park at the, drive a car and park at the theme park, $30 a day. You get inside, you want Genie Plus, that's another $30. And on top of your Genie Plus, if you want to skip a couple of ride lines fast, it's another $18 or $11. It varies on the ride and its popularity. If you want to spend more money to get more rides in, and you start looking at that going, why is it so expensive? Well, the reason for that is because they're catering to those who have a lot of money, thinking that it'll push out the average consumer so that they're still making high revenues, but just shortening their lines. But what they're seeing from that is that it's not working, that people ultimately are leaving the park saying the quality I get versus what I'm paying are two different things. So I'm just not going to go anymore. Plus you have a lot of people falling out with the woke nonsense saying they're not going to support it. It's, Rob, I just watched Lethal Weapons movies. Yeah, those are great. I love those movies. The Disney experience has declined, higher prices for less. Exactly. And that's what I was just saying is that you're going to see a decline. They've already had a decline. I think they're down. I think this report said they were down 30% from this time last year when they opened up after COVID measures. So they had a boom in the park when they lifted after COVID measures, and they're saying they're down 30% from that, which is huge. It's, yeah, it's crazy. Skipping the line just makes people longer wait in the other line, gets them pissed off. Exactly. But you're going to get to a point where people are saying, I'm just not going to go. Right. Because I'm not going to pay an extra, $200 for a family of 5 to skip lines when I've already paid 150 plus to get in for the day. Right. Like you're going to see that. They get to keep the revenue up to pay for all the movies. But the problem is that even if they're losing on the movies, look, if I worked for a movie company or a corporation like Disney, where you have a board and you go in and talk to them and say, what's going on with our movies? Well, they're only grossing $300-400 million if they're blockbusters. Okay, how come the Mario Brothers movie is doing $1 billion within its first 2.5 weeks? Oh, well, that's because they didn't have woke politics like we do. Okay, so I don't know any company that says I'm comfortable losing $100 million on a movie. I don't care how much the parks are making. If you're in charge of a business and you walk in and you're solely looking at money, I'm not talking about people who go, well, we're still going to push this woke stuff because we're committed to it. I'm talking about financials. If you know how to run a business or a corporation and you walk in and you're an efficiency expert, and which is what they always called the guys who make those decisions, but you walk in and you take a look at their books and go, guys, you're losing $1 billion a year on these stupid movies. $1 billion. Yeah, but we made $2.5 billion in park revenues. Okay, but wouldn't it be nice to make $4 billion a year instead of 2.5? Like, at some point in time, someone has to come in and say, this isn't impressing our shareholders. People are leaving the parks, and we either got to drop this shit and move on, or we're going to die off. Because Universal, when it comes to, there was an article that came out the other day asking if Universal's better than Disney in terms of theme parks. Because Universal now has Harry Potter. They've got Super Nintendo World. They've got The Simpsons. They've got Jurassic Park and all their Universal franchises. You're getting a better experience there for less money, I might add. Universal's about 3/4 of the cost of Disney. So to go for a day. So people are starting to weigh out, is it better than Disney? Now, if Universal continues to pick up their socks when it comes to their animation projects, what they're offering in their worlds, in their theme parks, that's going to spell trouble for Disney. And that's where I'm saying that you're going to get these efficiency experts who come in from on behalf of the board that say, I don't care if you think the Force is female and if you think we should be doing gender equality films and gay characters and everything. It's not flying with people. It's not going to happen anymore. We can't just piss away money. When you're a publicly traded company, you have to act in the best interest of your investors. And investors are going to start getting pissed off when their stock goes down. Disney's taking the trailer park out of their theme park. Well, it's not a matter of the trailer park. What they're doing is saying that, say for like the average family, like so my wife and I went to Disney for our honeymoon back in 2006. And when we went there, the average price to get into the park, I think, was about $80 a day or something like that. It's now $130, $140. But if you want to get on any rides, you got to buy this Genie Plus. And that Genie Plus is an extra $30 to $40 a day. Plus you got to pay for parking now. You got to do all these other things. So when you add it all up, instead of spending your $80 a day, you're spending, to take a family, say the average family with 2 kids, you're looking at a $500 day just to get in. That's before you do anything, before you buy any souvenirs, before you do anything. So the average family looks at $500 for a day and says, we can't afford it, especially with a recession in the US. They're saying we can't afford it. And Disney's saying, good, cater to the rich, rack up our prices, and the rich will come here. The more wealthier will come here, and that reduces our lines. But by charging more, we're making back the money we're losing by kicking out those customers. It's not working out well for them. When you look at Disney, when you look at their movies, when you look at any of their offerings, when was the last time you saw Mickey Mouse in a movie? Donald Duck or Goofy or any of those guys? They've side benched those guys. They've all Mickey Mouse is now is the face of a theme park. He's not part of the brand anymore because they're not doing anything with him. It's crazy where they're going. They're shooting themselves in the foot. Again, if they weren't public and they were making billions of dollars, I would say we're going to have to endure this for as long as they want to take the L, for as long as they want to, pretend that they're not losing money or stick to their woke agenda. The problem is Disney is a publicly traded company. And at some point in time, the investors are going to revolt. And it doesn't matter if it's Bob Iger, if it's Kathleen Kennedy, if it's any of these people and their woke agendas and their politics. DeSantis is hammering down hard on Disney World. It's affecting their stock. And when your movie division comes back saying we're taking loss after loss after loss after loss, we're hemorrhaging money, Disney would have to say, then we get out of movies. And we just base our shares on the parks. They're not going to do that. So they're going to have to conform or lose stock, which pulls investors. Right? Basic finance. Investors will walk. Their stock will plummet, and then they'll lose a bunch of money and then have to change. So I think change is coming. And I think, again, when you think about what happened with Bud Light losing $4 billion over Dylan Mulvaney, that they're apologizing, that they're trying to do whatever they can to do damage control right now. Nike doing the same thing. And now Illumination Studios showing Disney that, hey, you're not the only guys in town. We can be based and make a bunch of money. It's just a matter of time. They've benched them because of the possible loss of IP due to Mickey and the becoming public domain. I get that. Which is part of the reason why when you see any of the new Mickey cartoons, they draw it in the old style. I know that has a lot to do with the whole public domain issue. They've been lobbying to change copyright laws for years. Yes, they have. And I get that. I probably should have included that, but yes. I think the only reason I didn't include it is because I've talked about this a million times and assume that people know these things. And I get that, I probably got to be a little more careful when I mention that we got to fill people in on what's going on. But yes, that does have a very strong reason as to why they've benched those guys. But when you look at it in terms of investors, you're going to see some change. Nike especially, they're already talking about the changes they're going to make. And over the weekend, I watched, if you guys want to see a good movie, this new Matt Damon movie about Air Jordans. I think it's just called Air. It's the story of how Nike signed Michael Jordan to get these Air shoes, the Air Jordans. It's not a bad movie. Not theater worthy, but it's not a bad movie. The other movie we watched this weekend, the wife and I, was Tetris. And if you guys want to see a damn good movie, if you like these true story type movies that are very well done, Tetris was a very good movie. My wife was actually on the edge of her seat because she couldn't believe, if you've ever heard about the story of Tetris and how Nintendo secured the rights to not only make Tetris, but put it on a Game Boy and get the distribution rights for Tetris out of the Soviet Union. Some crazy shit happens in that movie when it comes to the Soviet Union. And my wife is sitting there going, oh God, they twist so much for these movies. And I'm sitting there going, no, there's been documentaries on this stuff. This is mostly legit. Like, what you're seeing in this movie is what happened. Like, there's been tons of stories about how the guy who went there to get the rights was treated, about the KGB, about everything that went on they had to flee Russia at one point. As soon as they got the signature, because they were going to be arrested and thrown in jail. It was crazy. But it was cool to see it as a movie. They did a really good job on it. Yeah, if you like any of those true story movies, that's going to have like a really good story to it. And it's really good writing too. Tetris. I was actually surprised. We watched it thinking, it's 2 hours. It'll fill some time. And when it finished, I was like, wow, that was actually a really good movie. Yeah, go check out Tetris. Definitely recommend it. I think it'll make some money. I think it'll make some good money. Hopefully it makes some good money. Somebody who's been making good money, and probably one of the last things I wanted to touch on, was good old Skippy. Good old Captain Blackface has been in the news. Let's get on to some Canadian politics and away from the woke and the king of the woke. Justin Trudeau under fire this week for taking an $80,000 gift. How nice. As he was in Jamaica, staying at a villa. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know too many people that offer $80,000 just for fun without some kind of reimbursement, we'll call it, or kickback. This is the part of the reason when I run for mayor that I've said I want to keep my donations away from these huge corporations that are going to look for kickbacks. I want to try and keep it as clean as I can because I'm not in the business of giving kickbacks. But I wanted to get into this one point on Justin Trudeau's trip because with his security and staff in tow, the cost of taxpayers for his 10-day holiday to a waterfront villa is coming in at $160,000 at least for 10 days. That's $16,000 a day. Right? That's insane. And of course, when he goes, he has to stay in the highest possible cost room. They brought out that he was the one who stayed in that $6,000 a night hotel. He now spent 10 days in an $80,000 villa. And the guy who put him in the villa was a donator to the Trudeau Foundation. Now, Justin Trudeau, as he came under fire from Pierre Poilievre this week, Poilievre stood up and said, we're not saying he's wrong for paying his security. We're not saying he's wrong for paying his private jet, any of that stuff. He has a right to a vacation. But he says the problem is the conflict of interest when somebody who donates to the Trudeau Foundation offers him an $80,000 gift of a villa for the duration of his stay. Now, Skippy tried to defend that and say, oh, they're friends of the family. His father, Trudeau Sr., was like godfather to one of their kids or something along those lines. There was a godfather in there somewhere. We've known them for decades, spanning almost 50 years. They're friends of the family. I don't care if they're your second cousin's brother's roommate. They're nothing. To quote Spaceballs, they're nothing. If they donate to the Trudeau Foundation, that is a complete conflict of interest. And he should have to pay that $80,000 back to wash his hands. It's not because that $80,000 is going to fall to us. It will fall to us when he gives this person a kickback. Could you imagine an $80,000 villa? What that must look like for Skippy here? I mean, he loves the black people. I wonder if he dressed in blackface while he was there. I bet he did. I bet he just wanted to blend in and have a good old time with the Jamaicans, man. But he, $80,000. It just blows my mind that it's scandal after scandal after scandal. And this guy's still standing. Don't forget his special rapporteur who was in the Trudeau Foundation. I don't know if he's still there because he's had so many people jumping ship. But $80,000. And he won't pay it back. He thinks it's perfectly acceptable to take on an $80,000 free gift. If somebody offered me $80,000 in free gifts, even if it was $1,000 in free gifts, I'd be saying, what's the catch? What's the catch? It's always there's always something. The PM deserves a vacation. He should pay for it out of pocket, just like every other Canadian. Yes. And Poilievre had a very good point when he talked about that as he was grilling Trudeau in the House of Commons. He pays for his vacation. He says he stood at the airport waiting for a delayed flight. Trudeau shouldn't be any different. But as Trudeau, as the Prime Minister, he does have a private jet. Fair enough. He needs security. It is required by law for him to have security. I get those things. I don't agree with it. I get it, but I don't agree with it. Because of what it costs taxpayers. I think that if you're going somewhere, look, we've seen it with mayors. We've seen it with people within the Trudeau government. When they fly first class. I remember when our mayor in Calgary was under scrutiny for flying first class, not Jody Gondek, but Nenshi. He took a first class flight to Chicago, I think it was, and he was under scrutiny for it. Who the hell is he? He billed it to the taxpayer. Now, once it came out in the press that he took this flight, he said, I'll pay it back. That's fine. I'll pay it back. That's an omission of guilt. That's you saying, I'll just pay it back to shut everybody up. If you treat your constituents like your own personal piggy bank, you shouldn't be in politics. This is part of what I'm focusing on when I run for mayor, is that if we're going to do anything, it's for as little as money possible. We're going to try and save where we can, not spend frivolously and say, oh, well, we just need money to do this. If I was mayor of this town and Mayor Ben Bankus calls me up from Toronto and says, hey, come to Toronto. We got to discuss some things. I need you here or whatever. Or, mayors go from city to city all the time. I'd be flying coach. Why would I be flying coach? Because everybody else does. And if the city was deemed to pay for it, if it was a requirement, if I was able to pay for my own flights, I probably would. However, because it's business and it's through the municipality, I know that they pay for it. I'd fly the cheapest airline possible in coach, and I'd stay at a basic hotel. When I was about to say reasonable, like no cockroaches, not like a Super 8 cockroach hotel, but like I'd stay at like a Holiday Inn Express or something. I wouldn't be staying at a top-notch 5-star hotel. So, I'm the mayor of Calgary. I deserve all these nice luxury things because all the plebs pay my bills. That's not how it works. Trudeau taking an $80,000 villa on top of $160,000 to taxpayers. If somebody gave you $160,000 tomorrow, what could you do with that? Think of all the things you could do with it versus jerk off here spending it in 10 days. 10 days. And that's just the stuff we know about, right? It's disgusting. Alex jumping into the stream. Don't forget what you promised me when you become mayor. They aren't kickbacks, I'll tell you that. 40-man security team? Maybe. They don't call it coach anymore. It's economy class. I forgot. They want to, just like flight attendants aren't called stewardesses anymore. So we all feel like we're cattle. We're in a plastic tube. We're in a tube. It's there isn't any ethical decisions anymore. Well, there needs to be. That's the problem. And that's why I met with some guys that used to be in politics. Rob Anders was one of the guys that I met when I was talking politics and running for the mayor's chair. And somebody asked me the question, what qualifications do you have to be mayor? And the first thing I said to them was, I don't have any debt. And they said, well, how does that qualify you to be mayor? I said, because that means I don't spend like a lunatic. I run a household the same way I would run people's money. If somebody says, oh, we want a new bridge and we want all these fancy bells and whistles, where's the money coming from? Well, we need to raise taxes to do that. Then we're not doing it. Why not? Because we're not, if we can't afford it, we're not doing it. It's the same if my wife came to me and said, hey, I want to go stay in an $80,000 villa for 10 days. Do you have $80,000? No. Then we're not going. Well, we could just take out a loan. Well, we could take out a loan, but that would be stupid. We're not going to spend money. The best advice I ever got from my father, and part of the reasons I didn't get a credit card till I was the age of 35, was he said to me, don't ever spend money you don't have. He says that's the one problem people forget when they buy credit cards, or not buy, when they get credit cards, is they buy everything. And they think, oh, I can get it on credit. It's fine. I'll just pay it back later. It's money you don't have. It's the same thing when I see people in Calgary back in like the boom years when things were really good. Houses in Calgary, when I first moved here in 1995, the average price of a house was $250,000. And that was for a decent sized, like 2,000 square foot home, $250K. And they kind of, from 1995 to 2003, so for 8 years, they kind of stayed around the same level. They didn't rise like they do now. And around 2003 area, we had a material shortage in town. And what happened with the material shortage was anybody moving from big cities like Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, they were moving to Calgary and there were no new homes being built. So all they had to buy were houses that were pre-lived in, pre-existing homes. So my dad's neighbor had his house on the market for 6 months before that happened. And he had his house listed at $230,000 and he couldn't sell it. And he was trying to move to Moose Jaw. And he was commuting back and forth during like week on, week off until he sold his house and was able to move his family. And I remember my old man, talking to him off and on about things. And then one weekend he came out of the house and I was sitting outside with my dad and a new for sale sign was going up on the guy's property. And my dad says, you trying your luck with a new realtor? And he says, yeah, but this one told me to sell the house at $260,000. And if I didn't sell it by the end of the weekend, he'd buy it at list. So he says, I got nothing to lose. So that means by the end of the weekend, my house will be sold. I'm good to go. And my dad was puzzled and he says, hold on, 260, you couldn't sell it at 230. He says, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. So I sat outside with my dad that weekend. I came back. And the realtor was outside going from car to car to car, taking bids on this house. Nobody went inside and looked at it. So either people just looked online and saw what it looked like on the internet or whatever. They didn't care. The realtor was taking bids. The guy sold his house for $460,000. So $100,000 above list. Nobody going inside. No conditions. My dad's jaw hit the floor. Why? Well, then my cousin came over that day, and my cousin's he was a contractor at the time, journeyman carpenter. And he was working on houses. He was doing siding at the time on houses. And my old man says, do you have any idea what's going on with the housing market? And he says, yeah, there's a material shortage. He says, what do you mean? He says, well, there's no materials to build new houses. So all the housing's going up. This was in 2003. So the average house in Calgary went from $250,000 or less to $450,000, $500,000 overnight. And because I remember freaking out and telling my old man, I'm never going to be able to afford to buy a house. This is ridiculous. They've doubled overnight. And my dad says, just pump your brakes, because he says, as soon as the materials come back, it'll right itself. They'll correct themselves. You'll see a drop in the market because there will be housing available. You've got people moving from Vancouver, from Montreal, from Toronto, these cities where houses at the time were close to $1 million in value. And he says they'll course back to where they were. These guys overpaid. It'll all stabilize. Well, the materials came in, and the home builders looked at it and said, no. If those houses are worth $500,000, our houses are worth $500,000. So the price kind of stayed there, and it never went anywhere. So that long story leading into credit cards was you had this influx of people in Calgary that had $200,000 mortgages that their house is now falsely inflated to $500,000 in value. So all of a sudden you saw all these people on streets going and getting boats and fifth wheel trailers and new trucks and all these things, because the bank would call in, they're your best friend. Hey, we're going to give you all this money. We're going to give you all this access to cash to do all these renovations or anything you want to do. You want to go on a vacation? You want to buy a new vehicle? You want to get some luxury items? Here's your chance, because it's all on your equity now. You've got, your house is worth all this money. The problem is that I've seen people living on that equity. My former brother-in-law was one of those people. He bought a fifth wheel trailer. He bought a truck and did some home renos all on his equity. He bought season tickets to the Flames on his equity. And he was an engineer at the time. And I remember turning back and saying, my wife works in oil and gas. I know how that industry works. It's boom bust. You work for 5-6 years, then you get laid off. Then you go back and, 8 or 9 months, things start to creep up again. And then we start doing well again. This guy had bills through the yin yang, and he kept saying, but I'm making all this money. And when he lost his job, when Justin Trudeau took office in 2015, it just busted. There was no recovery. Houses surprisingly didn't drop down more than about 2 or 3%, which they've already recovered. But I remember we bought our house in 2015, and he was trying to sell his house in 2015. But the problem was he had taken so much equity from projected gains from the bank. He couldn't sell his home for what he needed to clear in order to just break even on his debts. And he was struggling. He had to sell his vehicles, his fifth wheel trailer, at a loss so that he had less debt when he went to sell the house. And eventually, about 8 months after he put it on the market, he got it sold. And he had to work his ass off to pay back all the money that he took for nothing. That's very dangerous. And that's where I say, if I was the mayor of this town, if somebody comes and says, well, we need to expand the train line. Okay, well, that might be necessary, but how much is it going to cost? Well, this much, and we don't have any money from the province. We don't have any money in the city coffers. So we're going to raise taxes on the people. For 1/4 of the city to get access to something? Yes. We're going to charge everybody an increase. Yes. Is there no other way to do that? At this moment in time, no. Okay. Well, unless we can find another way, I would tell them we either only expand it part of the way as to what we can afford, or we shelf it until we can move forward. That's the thing, is I don't want to spend money we don't have. You got to be responsible with this shit. You have to be prepared to say no. And that's the biggest problem with our entitled governments. And when you look at Trudeau, you look at his hotel expenses, his vacation expenses, all of his expenses, his food bills, his like, when I say food bills, his grocery bills, not his vacation food bills. Their expenditures are out the window. Astronomical. And if they wanted to spend their own money on those things, go ahead. Sky's the limit. That's your money. But when you're talking about taxpayer money, you have to treat it like your own money, in the sense that If I go out tomorrow and say, for example, as an arcade collector, I go out tomorrow and somebody comes to me with a Donkey Kong machine and says, "Hey, I got this Donkey Kong machine. It's $5,000." And I go and look at my bank and go, "Ooh, I've got $5,200 in my bank account, so I can afford it." And then I come home and tell my wife, "I just spent 5,000 out of the 5,200 that was in our bank account." Her first question is, "How do we afford food? How do we turn on our lights? How do we put gas in our car? How do we pay our bills?" Oh, I didn't think about that. Just because the money is there doesn't mean you spend it. You have to be responsible. I want to bring change when it comes to this stuff to show that, hey, if we can be responsible with money, people have more trust in what we're doing. The people are happy. If you don't raise their taxes every year, you're going to see more people move here because it'll be more affordable. You're going to see people working harder because they want to stay. You're going to see motivation from those that don't want to work because they're going to see how good things are and say, I want a piece of that. Hire a trusted advisor. The people in office will talk to you in circles. I get it. Banks held back lending when interest rates went up. Houses devaluated, brought down personal wealth. Yes, and that's part of economics. That's part of inflation. And are interest rates going to come down anytime soon? I don't think so. I think in the next 3 to 4 years, you might see them start to come down a little bit as things, right themselves. But a lot of things in Alberta, especially, they're going to hang in the balance when it comes to this election next month with Rachel Notley and Danielle Smith. Western Standard was reporting that Danielle Smith is 5 points in the lead right now. But even then, those are thin margins. And it's scary to think about Rachel Notley. I don't understand how anybody can vote for this woman, because when you look at Rachel Notley, she's already shown Albertans what we get when she's in power. We've experienced this one time before, and everybody was miserable. And I look at it and say, how can anyone, I'm not even talking like party affiliation or your preferences. I don't know anybody who has ever paid a bill in their life who could look at Rachel Notley and say, give me more of that. I don't see it. It's just basic. I'd be saying the same thing if Danielle Smith had done the same stuff Rachel Notley did. I'd be saying, look, you can't vote in these people that just make your life miserable and unaffordable. I don't get it. I thought Danielle Smith would be blowing her out of the competition, but I know that you've got the younger vote. There's a lot of factors in place when it comes to Rachel Notley. It makes me very leery of interference. It makes me wonder if we're going to see interference. So a lot's riding in next month's election, and I'm going to be covering that as much as I can on this channel as we get closer to that date, because it's not just an Alberta thing. This is going to affect a lot of the country. There's a lot of people that want to move to Alberta. I know Clyde in particular. He's told me, I want to move to Alberta. I'm kidding. That's just a joke. Clyde will never move to Alberta. But there's people that want to move to Alberta that are waiting to see the results of this election before they decide if they're going to pack up and move. If Rachel Notley wins this election, it's going to make things very difficult for me running for mayor, because you're going to have that leftist support. Things are going to get harder for Calgarians. I don't even want to think about a world where Danielle Smith loses. She can't run on her record. The attack ads. Yes, absolutely. Her voters are not known for being intelligent. I get it. It's scary to think it's only a 5-point lead. And as we get closer, it's going to narrow even more. The problem, and Rob's mentioning it down here, that the attack ads are relentless. Attack ads are one thing, but here's the thing. A lot of people get switched off by those, and that may sway some voters in Danielle Smith's favor. And not only that, I still think that when you're just running attack ads, a lot of people, it shows that people like Danielle Smith are winning, is what it is. I've never really seen when attack ads prove to be very useful in terms of, they're useful to a degree, but they're not useful in terms of deciding the outcome of an election. I'm hoping that there's enough smart Albertans that realize we've already seen what Notley brought to the table, and we've only had a short period of time to see what Danielle Smith has done, and she's done great things. She'll do better things when she's outside of this election, because the problem with this election is that she's been tiptoeing around her policies since taking the chair of premier, simply because she knew she had an election coming up right away. And if she pisses off too many people, she's going to have a harder time getting that vote. I think that once she takes the chair, you're going to start seeing better policy coming forward, more aggressive stance. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see. It's Timo coming in. You got to have Danielle. Absolutely agree. Smith for mayor of 2025. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mike. Welcome into the stream. But guys, we've been going for almost 2 hours. This is longer than we usually go. I'm going to have to wrap it up there. And again, this week, it's going to be a little inconsistent in terms of every day having videos. I'm going to be working real hard to finish up our newest book. So that'll require me to take a little bit of a step back from YouTube. If you're watching this video now, and if you missed most of this live stream, I will be restreaming it tomorrow as a video for anybody who wants to listen to it in podcast format. Hopefully I get this book done this week, and then we can get back to, business as usual. But if it is your first time here, if you enjoyed this stream, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as we're very close to 5,000 subs. I'd like to try and hit that within a month. Turn on your bell for notifications, because even if I am unable to do video content this week, I may go live if I find some time, just to fill in some gaps. I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream, and have yourself a great evening and a great week. And I will catch you on the next one. Take care.